We're all familiar with the witch trials that took place in Salem, Massachusetts back between the dates of February 1692 and May 1693. But Salem isn't the only place in the United States that held witch trials.
Mystery, murder, red magic, heroes, and
Welcome to this week's Midweek Mini. A century after the witch trials in Salem took place, a new round of trials took place in Fairfield County in South Carolina. A cult known as the Gifted Brethren practiced what I believe was black magic and had given its top leaders the names of God the Father, Jesus Christ, and the Holy Ghost. Among other things, this group practiced hypnosis, and before the cult was broken up, many members had been tried and hanged for murders that they had committed. Many of the gifted members came to be referred to as witches. Now, Mary Engelman had moved to Fairfield County from Lexington County, and her reputation of being a witch followed her when she moved. I can't find any reference to her being a member of the Gifted Brethren, other than the fact that she lived within 20 miles of their headquarters, but she was one of the main people that were put on trial in the witch trials of Fairfield County. The prosecutor at the trial said that when the first people who they believed were witches had settled in the area, their practices were fairly tame, and they referred to them as white hexes. But in 1792, there was a string of strange happenings that took place where women began to act possessed. The judge that presided over this trial wasn't what we know as a judge today. Apparently, he had the biggest plantation, so that made him worthy of passing judgment. The accused were taken to his plantation to stand trial. They selected a jury, and a man by the name of John Crossland was appointed as the sheriff and executioner. The trial took place at night in a hut. Mary was accused of placing a spell on Rosie Henley and her sister. Rosie was the worst affected by this spell, and even went so far to say she was possessed by the devil. I read that she would levitate in her bed, and both sisters had bites on their necks and had pins and splinters stuck all over their body. And the prosecutor fully believed that these levitations took place because he said that there had been evidence of levitation taking place in another home in the lower part of Fairfield County. Mary's own son said that once Mary had asked him for one of his cows, and when he refused to give her a cow, Mary cast a spell on the cow, causing it to jump up, fall, and break its neck. Mary's grandson accused her of turning him into a horse once, and she rode him to the prosecutor's apple orchard. And while he was there with her at that apple orchard, he reached up to get, he stretched his neck out to get an apple off of the tree, and when she saw what he was doing, she punched him, like right in the cheek. But anyway, there was also this man that was affected by Mary's spells, and his name was Isaac Collins. He accused Mary of working with Satan. And the reason he said this kind of makes me laugh, because he said that one day he took his old trusty rifle out to do some deer hunting. He spotted a deer in a field, but the rifle just wouldn't fire. It was like the rifle was bewitched, or it had a curse or a spell or something on it. So he removed the ball, split it, and replaced it with a little piece of silver. It was like a little sliver of silver. He was able to fire his gun, but the deer had disappeared, and in its place was a large black cat that appeared, and it limped away. Now, a few days later, while he was working in his cornfield, he got thirsty, so he went to the creek that was close by his field, and Mary approached him, and her arm was in a sling. She blamed him for the injury and said that she would never forget what he did to her. After that, he accused her of turning him into a horse and rode him to a grand convention of witches. He wasn't sure where this was, but he did say he thought it was in the United States. He even went as far to say that the devil galloped up beside them and told Mary that she had a splendid horse. Now, none of the people who were accused of witchcraft during the Fairfield trials offered any sort of defense, but it could be that they were just flabbergasted by what they were accused of. And, I mean, you have to admit those accusations were pretty preposterous, so they probably were like, what can I say to that? They were found guilty, and their punishment was harsh. First, they were tied by their wrist from the joist of the building and whipped brutally. After that, they were taken down, and their feet were held to fire until the soles of their feet popped off. And then once that was over with, they were released and allowed to crawl back home. Mary and a few others were able to make it back home without suffering further abuse, but one of the other accused women, whose name was Sally Smith, was found not far from the plantation by a spiteful man who knocked her down and pinned her to the ground with a pine tree across her neck. Now, this didn't kill her, though, because the next day someone found her and set her free. Surprisingly, none of those accused of witchcraft died from their punishment, so the people set out to find more to put on trial for their witchcraft activity. Now, and this is just my speculation, but I believe since they didn't die, I bet that just spurred them on to think those people were witches, since they didn't die from all that had happened to them. But now this isn't where Mary's story ends. Mary thought that she and the others who had been tortured deserved justice, but in all of that area she could only find one judge who would sign a warrant for the arrest of those who had accused and inflicted all that punishment on her and the others. And that judge, he was a Presbyterian minister who was shocked by what had taken place. He issued a warrant for John Crossland, and remember, that was the man who had been appointed the chief and executioner. I mean, not the chief, but the sheriff and the executioner. And when John Crossland was brought to trial, he was found guilty of aggravated assault. He was fined £5, but he never paid it, and he fled to the west. So Mary and the others never really got the justice that they deserved for that cruel treatment. One interesting thing that I should tell you about before I wrap this all up was that even though, that prosecutor thought that the levitation had taken place because he had seen it elsewhere, I don't think he really thought that Mary was guilty. In his early accounts, he sarcastically referred to her as the dreadful old Mary Engelman. And he also wrote, and I quote, "Some persons now living may remember the great witch, Mary Engelman. She was a remarkably neat, tidy, and decent old lady. She was of German extraction and probably a native of Germany. Her conversation was pleasant, entertaining, instructive. Her manners mild, simple, and agreeable. Her knowledge in pharmacy was considerable, and her application of simples in the cure of country complaints was the result of much observation and gratuitous practice." So I don't think that he believed that Mary and probably the others were guilty at all. Well, that's all I've got for this week's Midweek Mini. Don't forget, new full-length episodes are released on Monday mornings at 8 a.m. Eastern Time, and minis are released at the same time on Wednesdays. Have a great week, and until Monday, keep it weird, y'all.